Aprendimos a quererte desde la histórica altura donde el sol de tu bravura le puso cerco a la muerte.
Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara.
Yo, I come from me in the stand. I'm in the field and you just sit in the stands. Take that bass out your voice. If you ain't got no gun in your hand, I do what I want, and you don't even do what you can. You do what you told. I got no love for my foes. They can mimic my delivery and copy my prose, but what they can't comprehend is how I stick to this code. It's either in you or not. It's not the kicks and the clothes. They ain't cut from the same cloth, can't come from the same loom, fit in similar shapes or even sit in the same room. Confusing authenticity with part of the costume. I'm teaching gifted children. You can't come in this classroom.
Dare to struggle, dare to win.
Welcome back. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Episode 29. Geechee, Cherie Danielle, and Dr. Yusef is not here today. How you feeling, Cherie?
Whew. Exhausted but excited. I think I just been running around like a crazy woman trying to get as much technical stuff together for this upcoming show. The Cultural Workers Got Something to Say in Atlanta, Georgia. I just made an official announcement on my IG, and you can get tickets at culturalworkersgotsomethingtosay.simpletix.com.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's just been nonstop. I'm transitioning jobs at the same time. I got a new job, so that is good information because I felt like stuff was getting bad at my job, and I was like, I better leave before they fire me. And
coming in hot. Coming in hot. What so really quickly, make sure you put the link in the chat so we can share it with the audience. And Speaking of the audience, we want to welcome everybody to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, where we bring you Black radical politics from CMB's vantage point. We love being here on Black Liberation Media, where you can get all of the dope shows and increase your media diet and your radical analysis and all those things. But what we need you to do is copy that link and paste it into one of your friends and share the link and invite them to the conversation later on. In a few, we'll have an oral historian, Dartricia Rollins, coming through to build with us on some of her great work, our Oral Histories project on former political prisoners and some of our elders who are still in the struggle. But even before we're there, because I've been reading books, and some of the people on Instagram and Facebook saw my study rotation, and this book, Beneath the Mountain, by Jennifer Black and Mumia. Jennifer is coming to town soon, and we're gonna do a book event with them. But I was reading the first 2 pages, and these are all like accounts of some of the people in, and it's an anti-prison reader, right? So all people who think about slavery and incarceration and all these other things, but
abolitionists.
Yeah, but this is a better definition of abolitionist as I've read, especially what John Brown said. But you choose between Nat Turner or John Brown, and I'm going to read either Nat Turner's last interview with his lawyer before they murdered him, or John Brown's letter to his family before they murdered him. Which one do you want to do?
You know, I'm a liberal pro-blacker, so I gotta pro-black it out with Nat Turner.
All right, so what I'm gonna do is, so we only have like a little session. I'm gonna read some passages, maybe share some notes, and then give your thoughts. And obviously, by all means, people in the comments, you can check that out. But again, the book is Beneath the Mountain an anti-prison reader by Mumia and Jennifer Black. So this kind of opens up with uh, Nat Turner's letter. Um, well, it don't really open up with Nat Turner letter, but open up with another letter. But Nat Turner, so it was another enslaved woman who got free, and I hate to like dismiss. I'm not dismissing her, but because y'all know Nat Turner more than the other lady, we're gonna talk about Nat Turner. But
Is there some
there's a couple things.
misogyny happening? What's happening? I'm just joking.
Possibly, possibly. So Nat Turner, this is a pre-trial confession, um, and as fully and voluntarily made to Thomas R. Gray. So that's where we start. So therefore, it makes sense to include Nat Turner, who at the time of this confession was both enslaved and detained. So again, they're talking about we cannot hide from history, no matter how ugly it is. Therefore, and again, Nat Turner is being very similar to like a political prisoner, obviously locked up in slavery, but even when he got them buckers up out of there, they put him in jail before they try to murder him. Um, and then so Turner was known to have spiritual visions and prophetic dreams, some of which he interpreted as a call to uprising, engaging Bible principles to rationalize revolts. Turner led the bloodiest slave rebellion in U.S. history, organizing approximately 70 Black people to attack white society that propagated human trafficking, breeding, and slavery. Turner's insurgents reportedly spared some houses, those of impoverished white families, who Turner believed posed no threat. While Turner eluded immediate capture, after 2 months, he was apprehended in response to questions from a white lawyer named Thomas R. Gray. So, again, this is what's going to be the conversation about. But I was like, oh, shit. Like Turner. Now, remember, preachers were the first black middle class. Black preachers were the first black middle class, right? And Turner is not like the typical black preacher. He's a revolutionary. He's not pacifying the revolution or uprising. But then, like to explicitly understand the class analysis, it just made me think about like, yo, while and you know this, but while people were enslaved, like, have you ever thought about like the white people who live down the street who don't have people enslaved, and then the person who has like 30 people on his property enslaved, and this is still like a neighborhood. So kind of think about your neighborhood that you're in, and what if like some of the white people own people and then the other white people don't? You still kind of interacting with the neighborhood. But anyway, like any immediate thoughts stuck out when I read that little passage, because there was some thoughts around there, Cherie. And you're on mute, by the way, too.
My bad. Yeah, I guess I never did think about that as far as you know, because I guess I just look at it, or I guess maybe how the horribleness of how they teach us in school. You're just thinking every single white person had slaves, and like the ones that were, I guess, abolitionists at the time, they were just people that just didn't like having slaves, and like you don't really stop and think that, yeah, maybe more of the people that would end up kind of starting to see the effery of slavery or enslaved Africans would probably be people that didn't benefit from them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
were probably likely the first people to be like, like this is, yeah, that's something that you really don't, you because they don't obviously it's never taught in that context, so you don't really think about it. And then again on Nat Turner, I think another thing that, I'm thankful for, meeting you and learning about liberation theology, because you don't think about that either when it comes to, just the way people like Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman and others had to look at the Bible and view the text. Because it was interesting. I had a conversation with my dad just last week. We were talking about something, and he was just like, it just, I feel like, the main reason a lot of people are always fighting, and I think we were talking about foreign countries, like it's just religion. And then I kind of told him, I kind of challenged him. I was like, it seems to me, I think that religion is used as the tool, for power and to, inflict some sort of status quo. But if you really think about it, it's not the religion itself. And I really started explaining to him liberation theology. And because I used to kind of think that too, but when you really look at the way people like Nat Turner broke it down, and when you really hear the way people break it down nowadays that are into liberation theology, even the ones that aren't necessarily organizers or would call themselves radical, people that just have more of a liberation view of the Bible, is just so many ways that they're able to find these texts and be like, this didn't even mean that, or they're looking at the language at the time. And I just, I told them that it is just quite fascinating, even listening to your interview with Jared and Bushware, and how he, was talking about just how you have to always take into account what stuff meant at the time, the language, how it was transcribed, who transcribed it, and so many other things. And when I really kind of broke that down to him, it's like it was used as like a political thing to have people live up to a specific status quo that they wanted them to live up to, so it was, but there's people that are obviously able to kind of break through those cracks. Certainly what happened with Nat Turner.
So I'm gonna try to read a couple more passages. He talked about I was 31 years old of age, the 2nd of October last, and born the property of Bunchy Turner of this country. In my childhood, a circumstances occurred which made it incredible impression on my mind and laid the groundwork of that enthusiasm. So again, like this person's writing or talking or being interviewed, talking about being property of this person. And I know it's probably hard for us, some of us, to like consider ourselves like literally enslaved or property and chattel as at least to worker. But then he talks about his family. He says, and my father and mother strengthened me in this, my first impression, saying in my presence, I was intended for some great purpose, which they had always thought from certain marks on my head and breast. My grandmother, who was very religious and to whom I was much attached, my master, who belonged to the church, and other religious persons who visited the house and whom I often saw at prayers, noticing the singularity of my manners, I suppose, and my uncommon intelligence for a child, remarked I had too much sense to be raised, and if I was, I would never be of any service to anyone as a slave. So he was saying his grandparents was telling him that. Even white people was telling him that. It's like, bro, you a little bit too different and too smart to. But so again, it's kind of like despite being a preacher, right? Because I guess when we talk about liberation theology, despite being a preacher, there's a external context, an external a social thing that's happening to them that it would be hard to say that like Christianity or religion just in general just means this or mean that. It's the person and the environment that they brought up into, and then how they engage that particular thing. So maybe this somebody planting this said like, yo, you too smart, you too this to be someone's slave. That influenced the way in which he read the scripture, which can be like relative or stagnant, and then how you use it can be, I guess, liberatory. So, i.e., liberation theology. So, anyway, I there's much more in this one and the next text that maybe one day we can get in, and maybe we'll bring Jennifer on and talk about it. But yeah, I just thought there was a lot of interesting things on there, including again like the class analysis part, because I actually never read this account. I probably saw snippets over place. I never read it. I never read John Brown's letter to his family, which is also crazy. And just kind of seeing the class analysis part, but then also seeing that there was obviously white people in his church or in the community that was also kind of sharing the same sentiments that his family was saying, like, bro, you're uncommonly smart, whatever that means, but you're too smart to be somebody's property or whatever. But any thoughts on that before we wrap up and go to our guests?
Yeah, I just to me, I really do think, yeah, it's an individual thing, because I feel like there's a similar case where it could have went the other direction with him, especially people kind of making him this example of black exceptionalism. Like he could have just been like, and that's me. Therefore, because I'm the pastor and I have this, and how you're saying they're the first people to have this higher set of class, that he could have took on this like othered attitude where it's like those people are slaves, I'm not, and I have, God told me, I wasn't supposed to, and only focus on himself while slavery was still existing. Where you, and it's kind of, you see that a lot in modern preachers where it's like, I have a special spiritual gift, I have this, I'm God's favorite, mentality, but it doesn't encourage them to be like, no, that's all of us, but they single themselves out. So it's like, I'm pretty sure a lot of pastors maybe had like a similar message and didn't, get that calling to be like, okay, I want to free my people, or all my people should be free, but just saw it as a message for them. So it is very much on the person to do, what they want. Because I do think it could have gone a different way, especially you got these white folks, all these people being like, yeah, you're not supposed to, you're not like the other slaves. And he could have really internalized that and been like, I'm better than y'all, I might actually own some of y'all one day. He could have really thought, but so yes, I think that's really interesting too.
So listen, we guest is in the queue ready to go. I want y'all to take a quick break, and then when we be back, we'll be back with our good sister.
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama on D. He ain't even get no shot up. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He thinking buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
Back to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win with Miss Dartricia. How you doing, Dartricia? And you on?
Hey, you can hear me?
Feeling? Yep.
Wow, I've never done this before. Yeah, hey, I'm doing well. I actually just left a presentation I did at the Society for American Archivists conference about oral history. So I guess I'm doing it's a double feature about oral history today.
Tell me this. I know before we get in, at that archivist space, was there because I went to one at the Auburn Library, and there was the people from the AUC, and there was the Emory sister who's the archivist there. And the AUC and even Georgia Tech, some of their archivists was saying some stuff, and they was kind of like, well, y'all can't archive and keep your own histories, and y'all need us. And the sister from Emory like collected all of them and saying, no, y'all shouldn't trust these institutions. Exactly. So I'm just curious, like, how was that being in the space with those people, knowing your radical self?
That's very interesting. One, I couldn't see anybody because I was virtual, so I don't even know. I just talked my shit. I'm allowed to cuss, right? Yeah, I just talked my shit and then I left. But I wonder if it was either Anika or Gabrielle, who are now
Gabrielle was the one.
Dudley. Yes, mm-hmm. I would agree with her. No one actually needs an institutional archivist, and we very much can maintain and preserve our own records. And yeah, that's nonsense.
So look, I actually am excited about this. I think oftentimes oral history and storytellers and however else we talk are left off the table. So if you can kind of lay out what your objective with this oral history project that you have been working on, and then maybe some objectives and hopes to achieve as you lay this project out.
Yeah, I think my objective always in doing oral history is preserving the story of an individual person and their contributions like to our history, to our movement, in their own words. Oftentimes, I think oral history is not looked at positively because people believe that, memories can change. Everybody's memory of a situation is not the same. And to me, it doesn't matter. I actually don't care if, you say something that contradicts someone else. And so in the case with this oral history project with the Veteran Panthers and BLA members, it is thinking about the way that the Panthers are popularly talked about, and even the way that the BLA is negatively talked about, giving them an opportunity to talk about their work themselves, and to really set the record straight.
So that was, I'm sure, an experience. I've talked to actually all three of them at different times, Baba Jihad, Ashante, and Jalil. What was maybe some I guess major takeaways or experience as you think about their commitment still, right? So if, for people who know their history of how serious they were committed, and then how do you kind of like experience their as they aging still their commitment to the struggle?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I feel like that was my favorite thing getting to talk to them about. Um, is their commitment. I think in particular, Jalil, who had been incarcerated longer than Jihad and Ashanti. Jalil came home at the end of 2020 after a long campaign to win his freedom. And I asked him directly about how is it that he remained committed not only to the struggle but also to his comrades. Like, they were locked up, they were separated from each other, and the way that you see them interact now, you would think that no time passed between them. And Jalil talked about the fact that when they joined the Black Panther Party, they agreed to and understood and committed themselves to these principles, and that comradeship doesn't just end because we're locked away, because the organization is destroyed, but it is a lifetime commitment to one another. And that also, I think one of my biggest takeaways from each of them is that they very clearly understood themselves to be at war. And in our conversation, we talked about the fact that a lot of people don't have that understanding now. And they all narrated, I think, very beautifully, like how they came to that understanding, what it looks like, and why they carried out the actions that they carried out, from having that analysis.
Hey girl. Yeah, I'm just curious about when it comes to your experience personally, like what things, I'm thinking from like each person you've interviewed thus far, kind of have even shaped your personal approach, whether it be your archivist work or just even you as an organizer in an organization. Like what certain things stick out from those interviews?
Yeah. So I'll start with, as an archivist, um, I think my practice always has been very much like community embedded. And so my practice is always to record the oral histories, but before I record the oral histories is to be in conversation with each person about like what it is they do want to talk about, what they don't want to talk about, and how like they want to represent themselves, and also giving them ownership of their oral histories. And so I don't own them. I retain a copy. CMB retains a copy, and they'll all be published on Grassroots Thinking. But at the end of the day, these are their oral histories, and therefore they can use them however they want, which is not the traditional way that archives work. And so I think this just like reminded me. Yeah. Reminded me that like this is very much true, especially for people who are very public, the organization that they belong to, very public. And oftentimes they are being extracted from, in my opinion. And people are, taking from them to write and paint their own narrative. And so I think that's one thing. I think as far as organizing, I think I feel a little more serious, especially talking to these older men who are still very much active. They did not come home and stop. And like, I think one of the most important things is not only did they continue to, and are continuing to be organizers and activists and finding new creative ways to do that, but they all came home and worked directly for the liberation of their comrades. And as y'all may know, Jalil was one of the founding members of the National Jericho movement. He did that in prison and then came home and continued to do that. Ashanti is one of like the early advisory committee members to the National Jericho movement. Again, came home, immediately worked to free his comrades. And then Jihad is currently serving as the national leader of the National Jericho movement. And so I think something that is really instilled in me is that idea of comradeship, and also this real clear understanding of what it means to be at war with a capitalist and imperialist state.
So you're watching Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, episode 29. We're here with oral historian and organizer, Dartricia. So could you share with the audience, of those who maybe not know, what exactly is like collective memory, and then why is it important, and what would it possibly enable us to do if we have such a thing?
All right, I'll attempt to answer this. So collective memory is not just having, so I'll take it at the point of primary source. So an oral history is a primary source. That is someone narrating and interpreting history and their own experiences for themselves. And so when we record an oral history and we listen to an oral history, we are taking, you can disagree with someone, but we're taking someone's word for it. We're taking their understanding of it from them rather than someone else's interpretation. So as someone who loves books, that is someone else, that is a secondary interpretation oftentimes of what someone else has experienced. And so when I think about collective memory, it is the memories that oftentimes we don't have access to. It is the history that we oftentimes don't have access to. And that when we all share like our different experiences related to, for I guess my purposes as an organizer, to our organizing work, then we are then building a collective memory that shows, gives us more nuance to our struggles, to our organizational working capacity, to the lessons we've learned. And then I think that when we are able to share and preserve that, then we're not starting from scratch. I think like for myself, the reason why I got into oral history is because I felt like I came into this organizing stuff very late. I felt like I was so behind in my understanding of things. That's because like revolutionary and radical history is not just taught to us. We had to go and seek that out. And then sometimes the interpretations of it is bad because who's the person who's got the money and the time to sit and write the book? We don't always have a people's historian like Gerald Horne, who's given us good history. Sometimes we're, left with some really awful takes on history. And so when I think about collective memory, it is how are we all contributing to ourselves and our struggle through the experiences that we've had in organizing.
I'm sorry, Cherie, really quick. So when you were saying that, there's this book that we was talking about before, Beneath the Mountain, Anti-Prison Reader. So it talked about how Frederick Douglass, having the ability to read and write, gave him the position to be able to tell his story. But it was many of the people who probably couldn't read and write who didn't have the opportunity to engage an oral historian to preserve their story. So it's like so many things got left off the table. So it just made me thought of it. Question.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about what we were talking about earlier too, and just like, and Jared Ball always talks about this, like, how do you know the things you know, or how do you like, why you like the things you like, and certain things like that. And it brings me back to like where we get our information from, how you can get it from like a teacher telling you this about this person. You can get it from a book saying this, or you can get it from a person that was actually a part of something themselves. And I feel like, I'd rather go with the person that was actually there. Obviously, you're always going to deal with everyone's interpretation of it. You know, I mean, there's always, oh well, your story, my story, and then the truth. So obviously, you know, there's personalities, feelings, emotions, and everything put into this interpretation. But at least you're hearing it from the person themselves, and you're hearing how they feel about specific things. I was listening to an interview, I think yesterday, with Jihad that was on the channel, and you know, they were talking about, you know, how people from people that are political prisoners feel about people being like, well, every prisoner is a political prisoner. And Jihad went off, like went off, you know. And you know, and I feel like it's stuff like that, like I said, that you're not gonna necessarily get from somebody that is just like pulling from the context and being like, oh well, I personally feel like, if you, after studying political prisoners, that yeah, because of the system, everybody is a political prisoner, and that's just what we should go with. Like, you're not going to get the personal feelings of a person that was a political prisoner, did go through being in prison for a specific political acts that they did. You're not going to get like how they feel. We're able to just make up stuff in a sense and be like, oh yeah, you should, yeah, that they would like that all prisoners are political prisoners. But when you're able to get things on tape, like, yeah, that we don't stand for that, and don't put me in the same category of people that like rape people and whatnot. Like, we are not the same. Like, you're not going to get that. So I think that that's, you know, why those things are so important is we, you know, and I, you know, as a creative, obviously I'm writing stuff about political prisoners, and I'm doing these things. It's my interpretation of what I've studied. But I do think having those archives of people, having those archives of people actually speaking the words and speaking on their experience is what helps, you know, even the work that people write, make up, whatever, be more accurate and closer to what would have honored the person. Because I do think it's, you know, history is closely, you know, connected to that, and wanting to honor those that come before us. Yeah, so I just want to give that comment. But actually,
yeah, I mean, can I add to that? I think, you know, by calling every, you know, every person that is incarcerated a political prisoner, it obscures like what, you know, the people who have been in prison, like for their ideology, for their political actions, whatever their affiliation, it obscures that, right? And it's important to be precise in the language that we use, and that is also to say that there are social and political conditions that contribute to people going to prison. And so, like, but that is just not the same thing. And I think in my interview with Ashanti, he talked about the difference between a political prisoner, a prisoner of war, and a politicized prisoner. And I thought that those distinctions were really important. And though I hear people say political prisoner and prisoner of war and use it interchangeably, I use it interchangeably. I think hearing him talk about it actually was really helpful for me. And I think when we're more precise with our language, then we can, you know, we can respond and act accordingly.
I see Musa in the chat. In Blood in My Eyes, George Jackson says every Black person is a political prisoner, and I do think that's a interesting. And I'm glad that you said that you use different stories and including people, because I feel like if the larger argument, if all Black people given this American project is forced into some type of survival economy, then the actions that breaks the social order is maybe it's political, but I guess intentional. But here's what I'm curious: as people who were physically working in the organization and were physically target for the work that they did outside and then captured and put in, there's a part with Jihad, he talked about the expropriations, and even Ashanti. And I'm curious, like, from your reflections, what were you thinking as it relates to like the movement, the work, and funding, knowing that like these people expropriations and other ways of figuring out money, and then now today it's like more evasive nonprofit industrial complex in other ways. So what was your thoughts around, like, I guess, the economics of the movement as you build with the three elders?
That's a good question. First of all, hey Musa. I mean, to be honest, I don't think I really have an answer because I have been on the go and I am in the process of transcribing all of the oral histories, and so I've not actually had a ton of time for interpretation and for actual reflections. So I don't think I really have an answer to your question. I think that it's important to also remember the historical context in which you're talking about, the actions that they took, what time it was, what time they were on, what time the country was on, and how they responded in kind. And Jihad even says, like, well, I don't know if I would tell people to do that today. And I think, there are lessons to be learned. And I think if we listen to them and interpret them for ourselves and come to an understanding based on our own conditions, we can formulate an answer. So I'm not just going to throw something out there when I haven't really thought about it. But I do appreciate the question because I do think it's a really good question.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the chat in this conversation about George. Yeah, I just, and it's interesting because I was reading, I didn't finish reading it, but that was one of my Black August readings. And I read that line when he described that. I do think in the context, it makes sense, but I do think, yeah, I do think, I think that having Jihad break down how he feels about it is valid as well too. So yeah. But as far as questions, I'm curious as far as when it comes to this overall project, because I've read that these interviews, some of them are like 3 hours.
Yeah, Ashanti's is exactly 3 hours, 18 minutes, no breaks.
So yeah, I'm really curious as to, because I listened to the 10-minute part and read the stuff that's on Grassroots. So like, what are your future plans and like how it will be, I guess, exposed to the public or shared with the public? And is it only these three specific people, or are you looking to do more people?
Yeah. So I think what is important to know, because when you hear 3 hours, so I do full life oral histories. And so these oral histories are from their birth up until now, which they were all such cute children based on the way that they talk about themselves.
Oh.
And I know they all have such cute, funny stories. I love them. And they're very humanizing. Because again, I think because they are kind of popular and the Black Panther Party is popular, I think people forget that these people are human beings and that they were kids, they were young, like all of them were teenagers when they joined the party. And I think that's really important when people have their criticisms. I'm like, I don't know what you were doing when you were 16, but it wasn't this.
Exactly.
But the oral histories, I'm working on transcribing them, moving kind of slow. I send each of them the oral histories and their transcripts to review them to make sure they don't have any corrections. I can't always get everything right. And so I work with them to complete the transcripts. For accessibility, I think it's really important to have a transcript to go along with the audio. The full interview, so all 2-3 hours for each of them, will be on Grassroots Thinking. So people will have access to listen to them and read the transcripts in their entirety. Some things I've already done. So Musa is my co-host on Revolutionary African Perspectives, which is a radio show on WRG 89.3 on Mondays, 7-8 p.m. We've been actually playing excerpts from the oral histories and having conversation. And so that's one way that I like to actually engage the oral histories, is to find ways for people to listen to them, which is why I published them on Grassroots Thinking. Because I don't know who's going to sit around and listen to 3 hours, but trying to figure out different ways for people to be in conversation with the oral histories. I've done another public event where I've had people be in small groups, listen, and then come back and be in discussion together about what they learned. So yeah, they'll be published on Grassroots Thinking. I am working on other oral histories. I do also have a full-time job, so I'd be having to find time in between. But some more very exciting interviews are on the way. After each interview with Jalil, Jihad, and Ashanti, they came up with a new list of people for me to talk to. And so, so I'll be working through that list. I'll be working through that list with them, reaching out to people, seeing, if they're interested, and getting these oral histories recorded and preserved.
I just want to say, I feel like I was at the table with you. It was like we were at that that Indian spot, or it's Ethiopian spot. I'm sorry. It was after something that we had, and we were all at the table. Musa, Jihad, Kamal, everybody. And I remember you coming up to Jihad, being like, "I need to interview you." He's like,
"Yes,
okay." Let's sort of like go from that moment, like I guess last year, up until now, and to see how that is, transpired into like all these amazing things happening. So yeah, it's just cool to see that.
So because Cherie tried to say, instead of reading Ona, who was captured and brutalized by George Washington and escaped, because I'm reading these letters, and I read Nat Turner, and you interviewed 3 men. I'm wanting to ask, did y'all talk about Safia Bakari? Because I'm always
every single one of them.
I'm always telling people about the letters and the marriage letter, and so please share a little bit of who and what y'all was talking about with Safia. I love Safia so much. Sorry.
Yes, they all love Safia so much. Jalil talked about Safia and the way that they worked together to start the National Jericho movement. Jihad talked about her in a way that for, a lot of members of the BLA, people didn't necessarily know that they were part of the Black Liberation Army. And they also didn't have the same popularity that some of like the other cases of Black Panthers who were imprisoned or went to trial or whatever. They didn't get necessarily the same support, and kind of were just left in prison to languish. And so that is part of why the National Jericho movement was founded. And Jihad talks about the way that like Safia just like went around the country to find her comrades, to figure out where people were. And like upon getting out of prison, that was her first act. That was her first duty, was to take care of others and to find them and to figure out how to get them support, and not only get them support, but to free them. And Ashanti, as you know, was partnered with Safia Bakari. So he talked about her at length. And I think one kind of story that he talked about is how she asked him to join the Black Liberation Army. And he talked about being so honored and so excited. And he was like, oh my God, me, you think I am worthy? I'm ready. And how, she connected him how she connected the above ground to the underground, and also made sure that they had the things they needed to carry out their work. He also talked about the way that she, showed up in the community and how the community saw her as an organizer. They thought very highly of her, and her comrades thought very highly of her. And he also talked about how seeing a woman in leadership was really important to him, and how, they tried to combat sexism. And of course, he says, we didn't always get it right. But as you know, you can listen to Ashanti now, and that's something that he is always actively thinking about and talking about. And he kind of points to like seeing Safia's leadership as like being one of like the catalysts for that, and also just wanting to be a good comrade and wanting to be a good Panther, in his own words. And then I think finally, Ashanti, because he knew her like the most personally, just gave some other personal stories about like her family life, her child, which is, he does not call her his stepdaughter. That is his daughter. So yeah, I mean, she was an incredible revolutionary, dedicated before she was behind bars, while she was behind bars, and after, and also liberated herself. Now, she did get recaptured, but she did liberate herself, and then worked to liberate her comrades.
Dope. Yeah, coming off of that, I guess I'm just curious as a Black woman. I know, we're given so much mixed history when it comes to Panther men, and men of that movement during that time. And obviously, me have met Ashanti and have spoken to Jihad, and they're always, talking about correcting some of, some gaps that they may have seen, when it came to sexism and things like that. But I guess I'm just curious as far as like even your approach and what you may have known before doing this oral history, and how it may have changed after speaking with them, as far as what people say about the Black Panthers and men at that time when it comes to misogyny and stuff like that, and sexism, just overall how that kind of shapes where you are now.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to find the word. I don't want to dismiss it. And before anybody tries to come for me, I am a Black feminist or whatever. But I think the thing that I learned, and I kind of hinted at earlier, is that thinking about one, we all have contradictions. And I promise you, if I'm around long enough, if somebody record my oral history or whatever, someone goes to my archive, y'all will find me problematic too. And you will find some of the organizing things that we've done problematic. Like there are contradictions within all of us. And that is to say there were contradictions within the Black Panther Party. And I think a lot of people have done a lot of work around it. But I think the thing that really stayed with me is, I don't know, these people's age. Like, again, 16 years old, talking about revolution, trying to make revolution. Your frontal lobe is not developed. It is not that developed yet. And so I don't know. I think I have a lot more like tenderness towards them. And clearly I can also see the way that they have tried to like combat that, and how they have grown as people and how they have changed as people. And I think, when we keep in mind that we are full human beings, that make mistakes, and that we should not be, completely thrown away for those mistakes, we can be held accountable for them. But to say that like the work of the Black Panther Party was not good because they were sexist, I just can't get with that.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite frightening. I mean, I remember I've taken a break from TikTok, but like literally, there was this one TikTok I came across that had like so many retweets. There's just one girl, self-proclaimed Black feminist, and being like, "Yeah, did you know that the Black Panthers were just this, and like they were all, like misogynist, woman beaters," and just kind of had this whole cast amongst.
And it's not everybody to like just also to generalize them as if like
it's just and you had some people like, yeah, and I just learned that, and yeah, after that I got off of them. You have all these people in the comments just being like that. I'm like, wow, they'll just never even get like the full context and layers of that history, because like, there's one person on TikTok be like, yeah, they were all this, and I'm just like, wow.
It's very narrow. It's very purist. And when I think my friend and comrade Cherie says, if there is an organization out there that does not have contradictions, and it's probably a CIA front. And so I take that seriously. All of our organizations have contradictions. We're trying to work through them.
Yeah.
The people that we're trying to organize have contradictions. Are we going to say that they do not deserve liberation because they're not perfect? Absolutely not. I would hope not. If you believe that, then you probably should not be an organizer.
True.
So I know you said you didn't do a lot of reflecting on it, but I'm curious, as you think about like talking to them and hearing their story about their childhood, and maybe even comparing the two, and then knowing like, again, these young people did grand things that we're still talking about. And then we have our moment. So I'm curious if you did reflection, or even you had some thoughts around this. I think Jalil was saying that, and then we had like movements of resistance, and that's what we need again, and not episodes of resistance. So I'm wondering if like there was any thoughts around that as you think about them, their times in organizations, and then our times in maybe the organizations around.
Yeah, I think, the context around Jalil saying that was one, it was in response to my question about how they understood themselves to be at war. And then like, what was their response to that? And he talked about all of the organizations that existed to sustain a movement, and I think like when I think about like episodic, I think about 2020. And this might be a controversial opinion, but I think oftentimes I hear people talk about 2020 as like this was this revolutionary moment. We were about to have revolution. We were on the cusp of revolution. And I'm just like, revolution where? Like, we were not organized. We were co-opted very quickly. Even some of the demands were weak. Some, not all of them, some. And that there were organizations, there are organizations, and there are more organizations to help, move and steer the work. But that was episodic, in my opinion. And that's not to say that it was not worthy, it was not worthwhile, and that I was very heavily politicized through 2020. And so I think when, he's talking about like movement and he's talking about this like long-term thing, he is talking about organization. He's talking, I mean, from his words, he's like, we need cadre, we need a mass line, and we need to be serious. And I think that is really the lesson. We need to be serious, and we need to understand ourselves to be at war with the United States of America as it stands as a capitalist and imperialist state.
Shay. Yeah, so I guess my final question is, I guess, what do you, once everything is on grassroots and kind of out to the public, and I guess your part of the work is done, what are you hoping, I guess, when it comes to just it being out into the universe? Like, what are you hoping manifest from that? Like, are you just want it to be something that organizers constantly are able to come to, or something that maybe one day, academic may look at and be like, I want to now make this a book? Or, like, I'm just curious, is like, what are some of your, like, I guess, hopes, dreams, for this work that you've put out into the world?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I would say, like, even after I do an interview, my work is not done. Like, I maintain those relationships and I am in constant conversation with them. And that's for all the oral histories I do, and thinking through with the narrators about how they would like to use the oral histories. So if they have ideas for like how to activate them, how to get them in front of people, how to use them as political education, that is something I'm actually always thinking about. And so hopefully I'll do more with these oral histories. You can get a lot of different things, knowledge, experiences from engaging with them in different ways. And so I hope that I will think of some other creative way, or someone else will reach out to me and say, I got this great idea. And I'll say, bet, let's do it. And yeah, my hope is that people will engage them, thoughtfully and critically, and that we will actually win this war.
Yeah, shut some shit down. So, oral historian, organizer, doctor. I can call you doctor or no?
No,
not yet.
No.
Not yet.
I did not go to
Ain't
school.
you're going somewhere over there? No,
absolutely not.
They give doctors.
No, those people who got them doctorates, they be reading a lot, they be writing a lot, and they ain't got the energy for that.
All right. Well, our comrade, oral historian and organizer, Dartricia Rollins, thank you for coming through. You got the mic and the space anytime you want to. If you got anything you're working on, anything we can look out for other than this project, anything we can look out for that you're on. I know your radio show and stuff like that, but plug away.
Yeah. Thank y'all for having me. Let's see. What do I have to plug? Shout out to my comrades over at Revolutionary African Perspectives, Musa, Steven, Taylor, Abayomi, Layla. I think I got all my shout outs. I'm not online. I'm chronically not online, but my other oral history project, Georgia Dusk, does have a website. You can listen to my oral histories with different reproductive justice organizers. I will be recording more oral histories kind of around this project. I have some others that I am working on publishing that I believe I'll publish on WRG with some comrades of mine who were part of the October League back in the 80s. And yeah, my hope is this to be recording oral histories for the rest of my life.
Let's do it. Appreciate you. Stop back anytime and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Thanks,
All right,
y'all.
girl. Peace. All right. So as we wrap, what type of reflections you have? We had a light conversation about Nat Turner, which I can read a couple more passages, and then we had a conversation with Dartricia. What kind of reflections, thoughts?
It was just interesting how they connected, and I know you sent me that message of like, make sure you get to a question because I was just reflecting so heavily on like, wow, like that, that's interesting because we didn't plan that, so I know I was blabbing about it as I blab about many things.
We gonna interview you too, okay? You gonna get your little interview.
But I think it's always interesting to see people like Dartricia, people, I mean, I guess this is everyone, but how people are organizers and there's something else. And how like, it's cool that, when the things are tied and but then they're also separate. They also are two different things. Obviously, you can't be like, well, I do this, archive work and that's it, I mean, there are some, but a lot of those probably aren't the best, um so it's interesting to me who's like, oh, I'm an artist and an organizer. So it's always interesting to speak to these other people that, have this double life in one world of trying to, politicize, revolutionize. It's always interesting to hear people speak about that experience and how to balance it and how it connects, how it can contradict sometimes. I think that is always just interesting to hear about, as I'm still finding my place, because I feel like the whole thing is finding your place in the movement. And I guess it's tricky. You feel like, oh, I can do one thing, but am I doing enough of this? Am I doing enough of that? So it is cool to just see people be able to allow who they are as a human and who they are as an organizer to be this full cycle, full circle, organic thing. I think is always cool. So shout out to Dartricia for that. And yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to reading history. I've met all of them. I work closest with Jihad, and it's great to known him and be able to build a relationship with him, and even Ashanti. I've spent some time around him as well, and I met Jalil last summer at a Black August event. So it's cool, to just like that we still have them here and to be able to get that history from them while they're here. And I think that's one of those things where you got to get it done now. So like I said, shout out to Dartricia again for like getting it done now, because I mean, the moment is everything. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see, how, they decide to utilize this and what people take from it. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know if that was long-winded, but yeah, that's all the stuff I gotta say.
Yeah, no, I think the when I was thinking about the Nat Turner story, I felt like it was technically oral history being recorded. And then even as one of my favorite books, Fidel and Religion, the author is also having conversations and interviewing Fidel to kind of like it pretty much allows you to navigate or rise above narratives of people and like let them say in their own words what they mean. Like, and I remember even talking about like facilitating Bible studies where it's like you don't have to interpret certain things in the Bible because it literally will say something and they'll say the interpretation right next to it. And it's like, so allowing people or authors or writers or whoever, historians to speak for themselves, I think is always is a dope thing, and being able to capture that in those people's words. And then this thing right here, also one of the things that another passage I want to read, Nat Turner was talking about his experience, and he said something about like the spirit. And then the lawyer was like, "Well, what do you mean by the spirit?" And so he said, the spirit that spoke to the prophets in former days. And I was greatly astonished, and for two years prayed continuously, whenever my duty would permit. And then again, I had the same revelations, which fully confirmed me in the impression that I was ordained for some great purpose in the hands of the Almighty. Right. So, as I think about like the spirituality, and I'm gonna read more, but when I think about the spirituality of people and like how we are like wrestling with this, whatever this dude believes spiritually has you talking about him 225 years later. And there's other people who probably was atheists or not whatever, and who whatever, or not, or also spiritual. Their actions and what they believe and how they believe guide their actions. Literally, this dude ain't never going, he ain't never going away. Like it's 225 years later, you still talking about Nat Turner, and I'm pretty sure another 100 years. So whatever this dude believes spiritually, whatever, like something was right about it, right?
Yeah.
And he says, several years rolled around, in which many events occurred to strengthen me in this my belief. Again, now this person is enslaved, seeing people getting legs chopped off, killed, raped, right? At this time, I reverted in my mind to the remarks made of me in my childhood. See, like you ain't fit to be no slave, young boy. He reverted back to that, and the things that had been strewn me, and as it had been said of me in my childhood by those by whom I had been taught to pray, both white and black, and in whom I had the greatest confidence, that I had too much sense to be raised, and if I was, I would never be of any use to anyone as a slave. Now, finding I had arrived to man's estate, so he became an adult and was a slave, and these revelations being made known to me, I began to direct my attention to this great object to fulfill the purpose for which by this time I felt assured I was attending, knowing the influence I had obtained over the minds of my fellow servants, not by means of conjuring and such like tricks, for to them I always spoke of such things with contempt, but by the communion of the Spirit, whose revelation I often communicated them, they believed and said my wisdom came from God. So again, he a preacher, but he also organized it. If you hear that, like he had people follow him, and he wasn't like tricking them and all that other. He was like making it plain for them. So yeah, I just think it's as you said, it's fascinating whenever you not only have people words record, but you get to kind of experience the duality of who they are, because all of those elders on that picture was somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's whatever, and old cousin up, and they talk about they work for youth programs. They was somebody's babas and mentors and all this other stuff, and they did some shit that again that's probably gonna make them be known for a long ass time, right? So yeah, I just think that those are some dope things, and I'm glad it like syncs up with what I'm reading right now. But yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really, like I said, it's a lot, and it was cool. I was happy. My dad's always like, "Wow, you know so much, and your vocabulary has gotten so thick." And I be having to tell him like, "I'm probably the slowest one in my circle, child. Like I just be trying to keep up with all these other people on Black Liberation Media." Um, but yeah, but being able to kind of explain to him liberation theology, and him kind of be like, like you onto something. Like I ain't never think of it that way. But it's like because I think I didn't, obviously I never thought it that way until, you kind of explain more of it um to me, and I think a lot of revolutionaries, especially because we might have been brought up with certain religions taught to us a certain way, and then introduced to like a different religion, we can kind of have like the outlook of that religion will be kind of from the people that originally taught us that, and not looking at, like I said, how it can be utilized other ways or interpreted different ways. And even sometimes, for me, once I got in the conscious community and got into African spirituality, I had like a very like quick look on all Abrahamic religions, but I think, yeah, learning about liberation theology kind of helped me, even, when it comes to like, other spiritual practice. Like, okay, like, because if you think about it, like, other spiritual beliefs, they all kind of need that approach because they've all been diluted in American context and white supremacist context. So even somebody may look like, oh, I got to African spirituality, I have like a liberated belief, but if it's still under the same capitalist, individualist construct, then you might as well still be, whatever you were before, if you're not going to use this new awakening as something that will enforce you to fight and force you to like fight for what's right, and challenge, challenge the bad, and struggle with the poor, and fight for people, of marginalized groups and all these other things. If it's not doing that, then you may need to look at, your African spirituality, your Buddhism, all those different things the same way. It's like, how has this been consorted in the context of white supremacy? So I think that that's something that a lot of spiritual people, should really ask themselves. um but yeah.
Yeah, Malcolm X said that if your religion allows that white man to keep beating your ass and you don't turn around and defend yourself, you got a badass religion. That's what's up.
Yeah, yeah, we can't, like I said, I mean, I think all the stuff is fun, I'm, like I said, spiritual, I'm very, obviously open-minded, but I'm just, it's the end of the day, the same way we can't holy water our way, we can't meditate our way, crystal our way to the revolution without some revolutionary, intellect and mindset to approach that with. It's like, yeah, you can carry a crystal with you to the war, or you can, hide out in your room all day. It's just kind of like, which one is it gonna be? So so yeah, so I think that that's a big part of it. Okay.
Anything you got going on this weekend you want to share with the people?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I did try to share the link in the chat as far as for the show that's coming up in October, first weekend of October. But it wouldn't let me share it. I don't know if I need to send you the link. It was saying it goes against, like, it goes against something. I don't.
Just put it in the show notes.
Okay, so if I put it in the show notes,
I
then,
assume.
or the private, I'll put it on private chat, and then I guess you can.
That's actually what I told you to put it in the
Oh, that chat. I was trying to put it on the thing on the comments. My bad. My bad. Sorry, y'all.
yeah.
A long day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, this weekend, yeah, I'm gonna have some fun. My cousin got a pool party, but other than that, everything is about this show. Me and brother Jihad, we really trying to do it big for the cultural workers in Atlanta. He's got a show, a two-man show. I have my one-woman show, and we are doing a double presentation October 3rd, October 4th, and October 5th, along with a talk back hosted by Geechee, y'all. And yeah, I mean, I'm just excited, and everything is really about about that. Obviously I still have a life and organizing stuff in between, but everything is preparation for that and making sure that it runs smoothly. 90% of the proceeds will be going towards the efforts of Community Movement Builders Atlanta. Um and yeah, I mean, I'm, like I said, even as I hear this, it's like I got to think about the artist part of this stuff too. It's like, obviously I wrote the show, but as I learn, I've always like, I need to tweak things, and I'm pulling from my own interpretation of things and how I write this story about historical things, even though it's a make believe story. And I just, even with the work Dartricia is doing, it just helps me figure out, okay, like, what can I put in or take out to kind of make things honor more of, you know, people who have done this work before us and things like that. So I'm really appreciative of that.
Absolutely. I ain't got nothing going on but the rent. But listen, we thank y'all for tuning in. And the people who are rewatching, shout out to y'all. Get in them comments, keep the conversation going. And maybe we're gonna see y'all next week, same place, same time. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Cherie, Geechee, and brother Yusef, he gonna be back. I'm gonna go have to knock on his door and tell him get his ass on the screen. But we'll see y'all soon, and thank y'all.